I do. Um, as we've been preparing for the village building convergence and all the things that we're doing, my body has often been moving quicker than my brain, so talking out helps out. And yes, welcome everyone. Welcome to the 21st Annual Village Building Convergence. Woo, 21 years. My name is Kirk Rea. I am a co-executive director of the City Repair Project. And I have been involved with City Repair for, gosh, about 10 years now. In a few different positions, from being a community member, getting support from City Repair, to being on staff, and now I'm a volunteer, or I'm sorry, a volunteer. I'm one of the co-executive directors. So Village Building Convergence, or VBC for short. If this is your first VBC, it is a 10-day placemaking festival or extravaganza. And normally during these 10 days, during the daytimes, we would be helping dozens of communities in the Portland, Oregon metro area install placemaking projects such as street paintings, community gardens, natural buildings, or earthen buildings. And then in the evenings, we would have events like this, where we have presentations, workshops, community dialogues, art, culture, music, and to explore themes of intersectionality with placemaking. And for City Repair, as a nonprofit supporting communities to do placemaking, we are working on leaning deeper and deeper into placekeeping and place justice, because placemaking is great, but of course, placemaking has been happening and before us as settlers have come to this land. And with that, I must name that where I am standing in Portland, Oregon, we're here on the land of the Chinook, the Multnomah, the Clackamas, and many other tribes, named and unnamed. And if you check out Danielle's project's Instagram, they also did a land acknowledgement for the land that they're going to be talking about today. And as we think about placekeeping, place justice, we know that there are many difficult, hard, deadly systems in our world today, as white supremacy, systemic racism has permeated the lands that we are in and continues to this day. Because while we acknowledge that we are standing on Indigenous land here in Portland, there are many other communities that have faced redlining and gentrification, displacement, and we'll hear a little bit about that, especially in the Afro Village presentation later on. And so for the Village Building Convergence, the VBC, we always have a theme that we try to center on, and this year we are centering on justice and learning and healing. And to that end, we are very thankful to a collaborator on tonight and this weekend of events. Like I said, the Village Building Convergence is 10 days. Though we've kind of sandwiched all of our activities and events into the weekend. So this weekend and the following weekend, because many of the things that we're trying to do, we still can't do yet. And so for this first weekend of the VBC, we are working with a collective of activists called People for Mutual Education. And let me get a little graphic. So People for Mutual Education is a group that creates pamphlets and that facilitates teach-ins to explore themes of racism and how to work against it and to work against bias. So big shout out to People for Mutual Education. Got a pamphlet, Environmental Racism, Reparations and Reallocation of Wealth, Building Anti-Racist Public Schools. And if you go to their website, which I'll drop a link to their site in just a little bit into the chat, you can find a host of publications that they have created, ranging from looking at issues here in Portland to a larger scale. And the next couple days for the VBC, we'll be looking at the incarceration system and community members who are now outside of the system and issues that they face. And we'll be releasing a new publication on Sunday around non-unanimous or convictions by non-unanimous juries. And then also a big collaborator of this weekend is master artist Michael Bernard Stevenson Jr. And for anyone who attended last year's Village Building Convergence, Michael was an artist in residence for the VBC, and they facilitated most of our events last year. And we're glad that they are supporting again, and that we get to share their work and hear from them and what they're doing. So Michael, People for Mutual Education, the next couple days. And then the following weekend, we'll focus on permaculture. And we'll also drop in the chat in just a bit, links to our event page so you can see full details and how to register. And I should also say for tomorrow and Sunday, we will be live streaming, but the events we are doing out in a parklet. So it is an opportunity to have a physically distanced, like in-person event, if that's something you feel comfortable doing. And there'll be we're expecting, wear masks, there'll be hand sanitizer, but we'll also be live streaming for folks that cannot be in the physical space. Also, big shout out to some of our event sponsors this year. The VBC is in part funded by grants from the Portland Parks Foundation, by Southeast Uplift, by Oregon Humanities, and Metro and their placemaking department, both funding VBC specifically, as well as some of the projects that we're supporting and hearing from through the week. And then of course, we get donations from individuals here and there, or we've got a monthly donation option. If you like our work and want to support us, we're a nonprofit, please and thank you. And as you can see, we are in webinar mode today. So it will be just the panelists who will be visually seen. But as you can see, the chat's going. Please drop questions, concerns, great things you're seeing, resources you want to share, or similar projects. And actually, before I talk, we'll get to our panelists in just a minute, but also want to share some wonderful individuals that City Repair has been working with the past 2 months and will be working with through June. Let me get my handy dandy mask on for a little bit of field trip. And I mentioned we're in Portland right now. We're at our City Repair headquarters. And let's see. Can you see?
Hello.
Hello. Who are y'all? Talk loud.
We're AmeriCorps Entropy Team Blue 6. We are a volunteer program, AmeriCorps, that's part of the federal government, and we are a 10-month residential program, and we are broken up into teams. So our team is a total of 9. Here are 5 lovely members right now. And we do 3 multi-month projects. And so this is our last project for our service term, and we are been doing some incredible work with City Repair and Save in CDC.
Thank you. And LaDavia over here is working on folding the pamphlets that I mentioned that will be released on Sunday. So you can get a handy dandy copy if you come. And if you can't come, like I mentioned, People for Mutual Education has a website where all of their publications are archived. All right, thank you for joining me on the field trip. So, on to our panelists. This event we are calling Green in the Hood Housing, and Green in the Hood is a project term that I must credit to Laquita Lanford, who we'll hear in just a little bit. They'll be the final segment of tonight. And Green in the Hood was their way of describing doing environmental justice work here in Portland and trying to work on as many issues at the same time. So working on housing justice while working on food justice, racial justice. Green in the Hood. And tonight we'll be focusing more on housing, ranging from intentional communities to creating shelter for our unhoused friends. We have 3 projects that we'll be presenting, and there'll be about 15 minutes or so of presentation, about 5 minutes or so for Q&A, where we'll chat your questions and our presenters will respond. And with that, our first presenter, Danielle, and you can go ahead and jump on the screen now. And, oh, thank you. Danielle, gosh, we've known each other for a few years now, and it was because you did a project with City Repair, yeah? And then we, continue to see one another here and there after that, especially in a network we're in called Environmental Professionals of Color, or EPOC, which I'll drop a link to the chat in the chat, or if someone, Zia, who's one of the coordinators, drops a link. If you're not familiar with the group, it's a group for BIPOC folks working in the field of environmentalism or interested, passionate about it, to hold space with one another for support, share resources, needs. And yeah, so I've been seeing Danielle do some badass things for many years now, and I am super excited to hear and to share with everyone this new endeavor. So Danielle, the floor is yours, my friend.
Cool. Thanks, Kirk. I would love to hear from everyone that's here online. If you want to say hi in the chat. And I've also got a little question here. Let me copy and paste here. So would love to say here, hi, hello, greetings from you all. And if you have a project that you're working on, I would love to hear what stage you're at. Are you observing the situation? Are you visioning? Are you planning? Are you developing? Are you implementing? Like, where are you at? I would love to hear from y'all in the chat. Yes, Green in the Hood. All right, observing. What else? All of the above, right? It's not like necessarily one of those things. Could be all of them. Love it. Some planning, some implementing, developing. Cool, cool. Ooh. Yeah, so as you're thinking about this question, you can put it in the chat when you're ready. But I will go ahead and oh, hi Jacqueline, hi Jackie. I'll go ahead and get started. So let's see, hope I can be as fancy as Kirk and my screen sharing goes okay. Okay, so hopefully y'all can see this screen, and of course my chat has disappeared. Let's see if we can maybe get this chat back.
And I'll just pop in to say, I can see the screen share, so it's working.
Thank you, Kirk. Um, Kirk, will you let me know if there's something interesting in the chat? Because I've lost my chat and
Yes, I'm here for you.
okay, thank you. And my goal is to stop talking at 7. Oh, 7 and 5 minutes for questions. So there's my goal there.
And we went a few minutes over, so if you go a few minutes over, no sweat, my friend.
It's okay. Okay, cool. So, yes, the project that I am weaving together is called Sankofa Village Arkansas. Um, yeah, and we'll get into it. So first off, my name is Danielle. Like Kirk said, I use she and her pronouns. I am the weaver of Sankofa Village, Arkansas, and I'm going to introduce myself with my family. So these are my wonderful parents, Robert and Deidre Jones. These are my paternal grandparents. That's Mary, that's JD. Um, none of my grandparents are no longer with us. But they're here in my body and here in memory. And then my grandparents, my maternal grandparents, Ignatius and Gertrude Hickens, and my grandma, my granny lived with us for a couple years when I was young, so that's a picture of us. I considered sharing a poem, but I timed myself and decided it was unrealistic. But if you have never heard of the I Am From poem, George Ella Lyon, it's really beautiful and a great way to look into your own identity, a great point of reflection. So Sankofa Village, Arkansas will be an intentional community that is centering Black healing, liberation, and regeneration. We envision a land trust model that includes tiny homes, a market garden, space for workshops and community with natural spaces for plant medicine and native habitat. The long-term goal, so sort of like the first big, it's still a big stage, would be the intentional community as like a grounding place. But the long-term goal is to create a multifaceted and Black centering organization that invests in people, in community, and in liberatory practices that will help us heal ourselves and the earth. And part of that effort is sharing the knowledge as it comes and the experiences. So we hope to create solutions that are scalable and adaptable for others. On the menu for our time together, I'll be sharing the land acknowledgement that Kirk mentioned that I was working on recently. Um, Hopefully sharing some helpful frameworks and questions that I've been asking myself that you might ask yourself as well. A little bit more about me because the identity part is really important for this project, and we'll share some of our successes and barriers and challenges and some time for Q&A. So here is the land acknowledgement that I've been working on for Central Arkansas. There weren't a whole lot of models to go off on, and so this is it. Central Arkansas lies within the ancestral lands of the Osage, the Ogoxpa, Mazo, Caddo, and Osethi Sachuan. We acknowledge the systemic policies of genocide, assimilation, and forced relocation, driven by greed and cultural racism that continue to impact their descendants today. Arkansans benefit from and enjoy the beautiful natural spaces in the state that were cared for by Native tribes from time immemorial until 1833 when they were forcefully removed. Despite these generational traumas, Indigenous peoples continue to fight to protect and reclaim ancestral artifacts and remains, tell stories, perform ceremonies, and celebrate time honored values. We recognize the trauma of enslaved Africans and the resilience of their descendants to not only survive, but make significant contributions to place, to Southern culture, as well as broader society. We honor people such as Daisy Bates, the Little Rock Nine, Dr. James Crone, B.B. King, institutions such as the Mosaic Templars of America, the Southern Tenant Farmers, as well as the 4 historically Black colleges in the state. We honor Indigenous peoples and Black Arkansans by bringing a critical and historical lens to our work and centering practices of resilience and healing. We see the movements for Indigenous sovereignty and Black liberation as intertwined, interconnected, and commit to taking creative action to support the rematriation of land for the First Nations of Arkansas. We've got some, I'll cue you into these links here at the bottom. Native Land is a wonderful app. You can access it online, but it's also an app on your phone so that you can learn more about the Indigenous tribes and languages in the place that you occupy. If you're curious about Arkansas, there's that's another great link, and also queuing into a Summer Wilkie is a graduate student at the University of Arkansas Fayetteville. She's Cherokee, and had a really great article in a local online paper about land acknowledgements that is also important if you're interested in Arkansas. And this is the map that I pulled from there. There's some keywords here. I'm not going to read through them, but language is really important. It's not everything, but the intention matters, as does the impact. And so being as intentional as you can with language and really thoughtful, I make some cascading impacts on impact, I believe. So these are here, and we can come back to these if folks have questions. I'm happy to come back. So as far as where Sankofa Village, Arkansas is at, I kind of wanted to frame it with an ecological design perspective. So Hemingway describes the ecological design process in 5 steps. That's that question I asked you to begin with. Observation. And for those of you that are doing or have done land-based work, this is very much can be stacked with permaculture principles, right? You're observing a space, the sun, the wind, where are the dips in the landscape, and where is water gathering, like all of those things. And in addition, ecological spaces like those are great ways to observe that, but also cultural and social contexts as well. Observations. Visioning. So we are very much in this observation visioning part. And then there are some things where we've gone a circle, right? To make that land acknowledgement, I've gone through that circle. And then there's other things where we're really in one part. David Holmgren, who I'm sure many of you know as a co-creator of the permaculture framework. And shout out to my professor Heather Burns from graduate school who helped pull all of these things together for framework around sustainable teaching and education. Is there anything else I want to say about this? No, I don't think so. All right. So here we are. A little bit more about me, and I'm going to try to be focused on just a couple of things. I want to spend some time with my family's earth connection and environmental ethics. My grandfather always had a garden. He grew up in rural Arkansas and dealt with a lot of racism. And I didn't realize this until later, but noticing that there is a lot of divorcing from earthwork for a lot of Black Americans, a lot of other communities, especially communities of color, where working the land was the only option and there were many barriers to doing anything else. And there's been a lot of violence that was connected to the land. For example, lynchings from trees, right? Very horrific, very traumatic things that are within our genes. And so for a lot of folks, there is trauma associated with being outdoors and being in green spaces. And later on and today, really celebrating that my grandfather had the resilience to, yes, those things are completely true. And his relationship with the soil and with the place that he called home was separate from those things. And I still find a lot of inspiration in that. I played a lot outside, was very curious, as most children are, and grateful that I had family that encouraged that curiosity, picking up worms and looking at bugs and all of those fun things. And my parents were also very into resale shops. And when I was young, it was more of like, we don't have a lot of money. And so this is the best way to access high quality things. And now I feel like it's like a trendy thing, which I'm totally fine with. But just noticing that that narrative around buying something used was looked down upon when I was growing up and where I was in Arkansas. But now seeing that as like reuse, repurpose, right? Like that is part of sustainability as well. The first time that I realized that being Black and having a strong connection with the environment was weird was when I was in third grade. I was inviting my friends to go on a camping trip with my family, and like nothing too intense. We weren't like backpacking 10 miles to get anywhere. Like it was pretty chill at a state park. And one of my friends told me, Danielle, Black people don't camp. And I was like, wait, this doesn't fit with my worldview and my understanding of Blackness. And I would continue to interrogate that question in college and in graduate school for sure. So there was this butting of heads between me hearing that recycling and sustainability, environmentalism was a white thing, but I saw lots of, at least my ancestors and my relations, that were doing these things that were also sustainable. Um, Lots of wonderful experiences in college with community-based fellowships where I started to understand a bit more about the impact of me coming into a space, learning that if my intent is not to put down roots and to make relationships, one summer program or one community garden can sometimes do more harm than good. So a little bit of growing awareness there. And was also the first time I did a fellowship at a called Overton Park Conservancy, helping create a tour for the old growth forest that is in the middle of Memphis. And that's really where I felt like, well, this is the place where I can come alive. Like this is where I'm really good at this, like making a tour. And I love giving tours and I love being outside. And every single person that I worked with learned something new. And I felt really empowered in that space, also bringing in history of segregation in Memphis. And it just felt like, okay, like this is my thing. So after that experience, I also studied abroad, which is another story, but decided to go to graduate school and ended up moving to Portland. And it's really here when I was in graduate school in this beautiful program of learning and reflecting and digging in to who I was and what I could bring to my communities, and just really being curious about that. So this is when I first started brainstorming. I called it Little Rock Eco Village, and I'll show you my storm board in the next slide, I think. Another important thing, I did a 6-month long program with Center for Diversity and the Environment called E42, and that's a reference to 2042 when the United States of America population was supposed to be then majority people of color. I think those dates have maybe shifted a little bit, but that really brought some intense awareness around history and things that I didn't learn in school. And some conferences and things, yoga teacher training, starting to bring more of more of a healing aspect to my work and mindfulness and breath, and that has been so important. And the last thing I will say here is that I also did some work at an organization that was founded by wonderful Black people and majority Black staff that served majority Black students. And finding that even though this was felt in many ways like a radical place, there was still a lot of resistance um, around dismantling characteristics of white supremacy in the structure of the organization, around how power worked, around communication. So me having a lot of different jobs in these since from undergrad past graduate school really gave me some good reflection around like what is really an organization that is living by its values, that is investing sustainably into people to do the important work that they love and know how to do. I feel like I'm talking really fast. Let me take a breath here. So here are some pictures here of some of the observations and visioning. So I mentioned in 2015, I started this, I called it a storm board. It's brainstorming. For me, paper stresses me out and I like to be able to search things. So I like having things online. So I can search, what would I be searching? I don't know, equity framework. Like I could search that and easily find it. I liked using Coggle because I was having this really busy mind as I was going to these talks and I was in school and I was learning all of these things and I felt like they were connected, but I couldn't quite make it happen. And being able to make connections through this platform really helped me to be able to understand what I was confused about and to try to communicate it also to other people. Drawing is another wonderful way to vision and to notice what you are observing. Um, Unfortunately, I mean, every kid is an artist, and then unfortunately, schooling tends to starts to emphasize it's only worth doing something if you're objectively good at it, right? Instead of like enjoying it. And so drawing is another great way to step away from that white supremacy characteristic of perfectionism and just process. So some of the questions I was asking myself during this time is what is my sacred intention? I kind of alluded to that a little bit. What are the deeper layers of my authentic self? And this is a question I am still asking. Where do I hold privilege? Where are my blind spots or my biases? And how do I stay on my growth edge when it comes to equity work? And when I say growth edge, there's a model of concentric circles with your comfort zone, your growth edge, and sometimes called the danger zone. And in general, we want to stay in the growth edge and keep trying new things and challenging ourselves so that that boundary continues to grow and we continue to grow as people. And I'll read this quote from Audre Lorde. When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid. And that fear part, I think, is what we see, I mean, all over the world. People are in this time of reckoning of social justice. There's so much fear. There has been for a long time. The 100th anniversary of the Tulsa massacre is coming up, and you can look at any massacre, really, any genocide, why it happened, the fear of losing power, the fear of losing resources, really a scarcity mindset, and really based on a hierarchy of who is better than whom and who deserves what. All right, we're coming on to time here. So Sankofa in the Twi language of Ghana means to return and get it. In another translation, it means to reflect on the past in order to move towards the future. So it's part of a larger symbol system that allowed people to communicate values, right? There are like thousands of languages um, um, in Ghana, and a way to communicate values without necessarily speaking the same language. And so the great blue heron is a bird that is in many parts of the world, but it is in Arkansas as well. And so that is sort of the place-based version of the Sankofa bird, reaching on its back to get that past to the seed of the past to grow the future. And just wanting to emphasize here that there's a lot of different quotes about learning about the past so that you don't repeat it. And it's, for me, this is more than that. It's about reclaiming ancestral patterns and ways of knowing. Okay. So these are some of them. These are our guiding values. That was part of that visioning process that really made sense to me. I have a blog post on our website that it has a short activity to come up with your own guiding values. You're welcome to check that out if that feels helpful. And just sharing some of our successes and barriers and challenges. It was a really big deal to say this out loud, that this was something that I wanted to do, to like put it out there. And that was really, really scary. But luckily, I have supportive people around me that I, kind of whispered it to one person, and they were like, yes, you should definitely do that. So keep wonderful people around you. Launching a GoFundMe to help purchase land in central Arkansas, was astounded to raise over $19,000 to purchase land. And part of that GoFundMe was related to a barrier around buying land. Undeveloped land loans in Arkansas are pretty pricey. 25% down was the lowest that I could find. I had a loan officer that was incompetent and critically unaware, which I can tell you more about if you're curious. Um, and the land appraisal process was messy. It was messy and opened up a lot of questions around how do you value land and where the racism plays into that. And that's not just in land, that's in houses as well. Some other fun things: logo design felt like a really big deal. Setting up the website and Instagram, blog, newsletter. Right now, I'm super stoked about the community collaborative. Stepped away from the land buying process because it didn't make sense anymore. And so, really throwing the energy into a small group of Black folks, either living in Arkansas or with roots in Arkansas, and we will be collaborating together to shape this project moving forward. And uh, we can talk about this later, but I think there's things about visioning and but more specifics about the vision for the organization. But I'll just leave this here for a moment. You can support us by staying connected. You can check out our website. You can follow us on Instagram. I don't like Facebook, but I did it. So we're on there as well. And you can also support us by doing your own anti-racist work. Whatever your project is, whatever community you are working in and hopefully are a part of, doing your own work to create awareness, like consistent reflection around what anti-racism looks like and how you are supporting that work in your own community, because this is part of a much larger movement for sure. So I will pause here. I don't know if I should stop sharing my screen in case people have questions. So I'll leave my screen up here, although I can't see the chat. So actually, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Oh, we got someone in Fayetteville. Shout out. Okay. Woo!
And one question we had earlier was, let's see, someone asked, where I'm from poem, can you give the reference again?
Yes. George, I'll type it in the chat. George Ella Lyons with an S, I believe. And I can, Kirk, are you going to be sending out like a resource thing to registrants or anything?
I would be happy to.
Okay. So I can include the one of the sort of like fillable poem links if that's an activity that you're interested in. Okay. Yes. Ooh, mustering the forces of nature and earthlings. Fun. Okay, so I see a question, or I'll just read this longer comment here. Have from D, I can't see the rest. Have totally heard the race outdoors trope before. The question of past trauma is fascinating. Thank you for that perspective. I wonder too about the effects of automobile-centered development on many rural communities. In other words, a question of access to nature, gems, and many Black and Brown communities. Yeah, and I think for me, I mean, I definitely appreciate going out to, you know, nature gems as Dee referred to it. But there's also nature where you are. The way that I mean, dandelions are magical. People call them weeds and they're unwanted, but they have these tap roots that reach deep and are able to pull up nutrients for other plants. Like they are amazing and you see them almost everywhere. And so there are definitely places, nature is all around us. We are part of nature. And so there are lots of movements around doing like side verge plantings. There's lots of cool work, I mean, everywhere happening, and parks, like mini parks. Like to me, the not needing a car and having access to nature close is a bit more important to me than necessarily getting somewhere else. Can I talk about choosing the word village? Yeah. To me, a village is feels like a very connected community where people know each other and support each other. I frame this as an intentional community, but that's really feels like very new language, and that's always the battle with language. But the area in Pine Bluff, which used to be pretty rural, but now I think is like the third largest city in Arkansas, the way that my dad describes the neighborhood that he grew up in feels like, a little neighborhood, a little village where someone had chickens, someone had hogs, someone was growing watermelon, right? There was like this exchange and this relationship. When someone got in trouble because the cops lived in the neighborhood and knew each other, when someone skipped school, the teacher walked to their house and said, "Hey, your kid wasn't here. Where are they?" Right? So there was this like relationship and this reciprocity that I feel like is really captured in the word village. Someone is asking about the incompetent loan agent. Okay, I will tell you a little bit. And Kirk, feel free to give me a warning here when we need to switch gears.
Well, and we are getting close. So if you could be brief, and there is one more question, but maybe you could answer the last question in the chat if you felt comfortable, or once again, if you're brief about it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Um, okay, so after the GoFundMe, I then had the 25 plus my savings. So I had a little bit more, half of my savings, and then the GoFundMe goal was 11,500 for the down payment. When we got to the appraisal process, so this is when an independent a contractor appraisal comes out to the property and looks at the land and then pulls up other sales that have happened in the past 6 months or so and determines what it's worth. The date that we were supposed to get the land appraisal um, came and passed, and turns out that the company rejected the first appraisal, and my loan officer suggested that it was because it was way lower than the agreed upon price for this 5-acre piece of land in city limits. So my question to him was, considering the history of racism when it comes to housing and valuing properties, are you aware of any systems that the bank, it was U.S. Bank, or any checking systems from the appraisal company to make sure that they're not being racist? And his response was, I've worked at US Bank for a decade and they're really fair, and I've never heard of any racism, and we have to follow federal guidelines, yada, yada, yada. And just no, no awareness um, of the factual, measurable um, trends of racism when it comes to valuing a house or a piece of land in a historically Black neighborhood, and a house when when there are Black faces on the photos and things like that. So that was not a brief answer, but hopefully that answered your question. And I will answer Bruce's question in the chat. Thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks
So
for
good.
inviting me, Kirk.
I loved all of that. So thank you, Danielle. Thank you from like sharing, personal story, the roots, and the question. Like, I always forget about observation and get stuck in go, go, go. Like I said, sometimes, or especially right now, my body is moving quicker than my brain. I could barely say that because my brain is barely here. Whew. So I'm going to invite Julia on. And Julia, I first met in another network. It's all about networks in this awesome work. A group called the Village Coalition, which we've got some poster boards as my backdrop. That the Village Coalition and a group called the Center for Public Interest Design, which I'm sure Julia will mention. And yeah, so I met Julia in this group where we are a network of activists and like individuals, organizations supporting a village model for creating shelter for the unhoused here in Portland, Oregon. And Julia has this amazing project of diverting waste to accomplish this. So feeding mini birds with one hand in supporting community and the land. So Julia, all yours.
Thanks, Kirk. Thanks for the introduction. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And Kirk, if you could give me a thumbs up or something to tell me you can see this.
We see it.
Great. I'm going to go to full screen mode. All right. I'm really happy to be here and kind of share this project with you. The name of this project is the Useful Waste Initiative, and I'm really going to talk to you about how it got started, the motivation with it, what mock-ups are if you don't know what those are, and then to use Danielle's language, we're really in the implementation stage and really trying to increase awareness and outreach to the architecture and construction community to divert more mock-ups. So just a little bit of an overview. Kurt did a great job just talking about this. So the Useful Waste Initiative really has two goals. It's about diverting construction materials that would typically go to the landfill, but also serving and supporting our local communities and the local either nonprofit or grassroots initiatives that are happening in the area. So what you're seeing here is a collection of images that are either mock-ups or villages or pods that I have seen and been part of in the Portland, Oregon area. And I'd love to hear in the chat if you're familiar with villages. If you're in Portland, Oregon, let me know where you're coming from. So first off, I'm going to just introduce myself. So I'm currently an architect in Oregon. I just got my license last year, and for the last 4 years, I've been doing this work, and for me, it's really about putting people first and making sure that people are at the center of our thought when we're designing. And I think pretty often about this saying that I heard from a client of mine when I was working with NAA, which is a Native American group here in Portland, that really talked about how we always have to learn how to live in each other's spaces because we're sharing this larger built environment. And as architects and contractors and developers and people who are creating spaces in our environment, I think it's really important that we understand what those kind of larger ripple effects are in the built environment, because we spend um, so many hours around buildings or in structures that we want to have quality spaces for everyone, not just the people who are funding the project, but everyone who may encounter it. So this project really is about people, and it's about environments and being responsible to each other and to the earth. To give you some perspective, these are our two big goals and impacts that we're striving for: to divert construction waste from the landfill. There is a lot of waste that goes to the landfill in every area. And then the second goal is really to serve and support community-based initiatives on smaller scale build projects. And really right now it's about housing first. How can we get stability for people and housing if that's what they want to do? So here's the context of that local to Portland. So as of 2016, there's about 30 to 35% of waste from construction projects that went to the landfill. With the growth of construction in our area, I'm making the assumption that it's more than 30 to 35% right now. And then on the social impact side, in 2019, there was a point in time count that said there are about 2,000 people who are unsheltered, and that's people without permanent homes, people who are either on the streets or in shelters. So where did this all get started? It really started for me when I was a volunteer with the Kenton Women's Village. And you can see there in the middle photo, two of my friends and I decided that this is something we wanted to be involved in and we wanted to contribute to. And so we designed and built this tiny home. I'm going to call it a sleeping pod, mostly because it doesn't have plumbing and electrical. It was really a room that that was meant to be a safe space, a locking door, a place to store your belongings. And this process was really significant to me as a person, but also as a designer, in part to see that comparison from what you what we built in the middle image, and then how once a person moved into it, how they transformed it and created their home and put their identity on it and really created a space for them. And so at the bottom here, you can see this was the first Kenton Women's Village in Portland. You can see a bunch of different types of sleeping pods. These are all built by different designers in a larger collaboration with the city and with the Village Coalition and the Center for Public Interest Design, as well as the neighborhood associations and lots of groups. And so just to give some background on that village, here's a couple photos. The bottom photo is the Veterans Village, which was one that came after the Kenton Women's Village. But the village really, the Kenton Women's Village in particular, was focused on women. It was a good model that really showed how people who want to get to be in the village can kind of find the stability that they need and then move on from there, right? They're finding, everyone needs something different, but they're finding what they're needing and moving forward, as well as forming a community and a sense of self-governance, but also getting services that they may need, whether that's getting a birth certificate or a driver's license or helping filling out an application for job. There's a wide range of the support that these village models can help people with and support them. So the Useful Waste Initiative really came at that point when, I'm going to flip back, when my friends and I were building this pod, and then I was also working in my job and was seeing structures like these three images and just visioning, what could this be, and asking questions. And I realized it was this intersection that we could both help divert construction waste from the environmental side, but then also help others find this ability, as well as, I'll talk more about this later, but like building, skill building and construction, and really empowering people in the community in the to learn new skills and also give back to those around us. For those of you who may not be in architecture, construction mock-ups are built on lots of different buildings, and they're really meant to demonstrate quality and test the materials to make sure that it is what the design said it was going to be, and make sure everyone's in agreement what's going to happen on this really big building that's going to happen 100 times. They want to test it first on this smaller structure. And sometimes these are standalone, like the ones you see here, but sometimes they're built in place, which I think is also really great, because then you don't have to throw it away or figure out how to reuse it in a different way. It's already built into the main building and is going to be reused in its final use. So let's get into the initiative. I talked a little bit about this, identifying the problem, seeing that there's a lot of land waste going to the landfill. And then this was one of my first sketches back in 2017 that I did, just thinking about, what does this mean? What could we do with it, and what are the potential impacts that we could have? So I had the opportunity to have a couple students at Portland State University in the School of Architecture work with me as volunteers to start to brainstorm what could construction mock-ups be, and really advocate for reusing them either on the main project, or if they can't be reused there, how we can prep them to be moved to another site and actually serve as a sleeping pod or as an office for those services that I talked about at the Kenton Women's Village. But then also imagining, what else could these be, and what steps do we need to have in place? So this slide is all about the first try. So what you're seeing are pictures of various stages of kind of rebuilding this mock-up. The first mock-up we got donated, the contractor gave it to us. If you can see this truck down here, they just tore all the walls apart. And so they gave us the panels of walls and said, here you go. You can reassemble it. You know, we got a lot of wood, we got the windows, which was really awesome. But then it became this much bigger thing where we had to try and get volunteers to help finish building it out, figure out where to place it for enough time so that we could actually reconstruct this together. And ultimately, we didn't quite make it. We didn't have enough time in the site that was given to us. So unfortunately, this is the big lesson learned, that we had to deconstruct it and actually take it to the landfill ourselves. And I share that just because at this point in 2018, we were testing out this idea that we had, and we were trying to put it into action. But then we were also learning a lot of things about, okay, we need to have a bit more pre-planning, really understand what we're designing and what we're asking the contractors and architects for, so that it can be truly reused off the construction site. So from there, we started doing all this brainstorming and started identifying, talking to architects and contractors and identifying what are the challenges and how we can start to chip away at removing all of those obstacles. So there really isn't anything that someone's saying, okay, we can't do this, but also showing all the benefits of that. And so with all of this research and volunteer work, we looked into code, we looked into transportation, how we're going to coordinate it, what's the liability and risk of these structures when they're getting donated, but also seeing it as a tax write-off, so that when people are donating at the construction companies or the developers, they're actually getting a financial incentive with that by donating to the nonprofits. So we put together a guidebook, which has a lot of resources for project teams. And when I say project team, I mean a group of architects, engineers, developers, and contractors who are building a building, and really walk them through the donation process. And so I'm not going to share all the nitty gritty there, but you can find our guidebook on our website. So at this point, I just want to show you where we are in the implementation and run through some of the mock-ups that we've had donated and kind of the work that we've done with that. So at this point, this was really important for me to see, just in terms of going through this work and realizing that each mock-up has about anywhere between 5,000 and 12,000 pounds of material that just gets sent to the landfill. And one of the side products of this project is I started getting contractors calling me saying, oh, we have these 3 extra windows. Can you take them? Or we ordered the wrong door. And if you're in construction, you'll know that this just happens. Like sometimes the form gets filled out wrong, something happens, and then you have things on your construction site that aren't meant for the building because they're not the right size or whatever it may be. And so contractors are calling me up asking, we have 20 doors, like, can you take this doors? Can you take this door hardware? And we realize that we're starting to kind of siphon off these excess materials that can help us convert these mock-ups when they get donated to us to really convert them for the use of the community. So here, from this point, from 2018 to now, we've had 9 mock-ups diverted in all for different uses that are helping the villages specifically. So here is a couple, I'm going to run through some of the projects, and this was one of the first ones that got into the process of diverting it, but it took a while to go through the architecture design process and construction. But up here, this middle one is in this like a Lahi project, and then the one on the left with the yellow door is also a mock-up that got diverted. And that was built fully by a contractor. So this one, we got a envelope, the structure of it donated, and then we as a group of volunteers converted it with donated and new material to finish that out. So this one was totally built by the contractor. They did these beautiful drawings just talking about what was needed for the project, what needs to be added so that it can be used as a sleeping pod. Here's one that went to Hygiene for All, which was a new project in Portland that was really meant to serve as a hygiene hub for laundry and showers and bathrooms and first aid. So we donated 4 mock-up pods to them. You can see one here. I have some other photos. This one was kind of the least built out mock-up that we had, that we converted into a storage room for all the first aid supplies. And here's one that just came in January that we was diverted and was fully built out, ready to be occupied. But this one was a great reminder that community-based design, you need to be agile and you need to be able to be flexible. And when something comes up, then you got to problem solve in the moment. So even if you do as much pre-planning as you can, sometimes you're just going to have to solve the problem during the day. And so our problem on this one was that day, PBOT, the Bureau of Transportation, decided to tear up the entire street in front of the village that we were getting to. So we had to go all the way around like 3 or 4 blocks through parking lots to get this pod to where it was supposed to go, even though the day before streets were totally clean and we would have been able to get it in there in a couple minutes. So that was a good lesson learned there. Oh, there we go. So kind of back to this, where we are now. Right now, we're moving ahead into the summer with multiple conversions of mock-ups. This is something, just to put it out there, there's lots of ways that you can get involved with us and really help push this forward. And part of it is just by, if you're in the architecture and construction fields, is to start thinking about these incremental ways that you can make an impact in the industry, because I think it is really about an incremental shift. We're not going to make these large scale changes, but if we can just send the mock-up to the Useful Waste Initiative in a village as opposed to the landfill, you can use the money you were going to pay and dump these to pay for the transportation, and then you're making these small shifts. So speaking of this summer, we're going to have a couple training sessions so that people get more in-depth information and knowledge about how they can implement this, whether they're an owner or an architect or a contractor. In August, we're going to have the conversion of 2 mock-ups that are supporting the work of the Afro Village and Play, Grow, Learn, which Play, Grow, Learn has a lot of synergy with what Danielle talked about in terms of teaching Black youth about agriculture and healthy nutrition. And so we're going to be getting some office spaces for them on their land, as well as building some pavilions and shelters for their outdoor classroom to help support that work. And again, sharing this information with a friend or colleague is great. If you're interested in working with us right now, we're hiring for a student intern, as well as someone to help lead construction as a more trained construction supervisor and trainer to help teach people construction skills, and volunteers who are coming to work with the project. And then just as a reminder, you know, we're all in this together. We're all sharing the same spaces and built environment. And so it's really important that we're all contributing what we can contribute to the space. And so with that, I'm gonna circle back and open it up for questions. I hope I wasn't talking too fast. I just get very excited. And I'm gonna give Danielle a shout out saying, we just went through this logo process to make a logo, and that was a huge success in feeling and creating that identity. So I think Kurt was doing a great job at putting some links in the chat, which I appreciate. I'm happy to answer anyone's questions or thoughts or comments. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so I can see my chat.
And one comment we had earlier from Anne was saying, yes, I'm in Portland and concerned about people being displaced. I hope the project supports a garden space. It helps people's mental stability, which maybe you could mention Hygiene for All again.
Yeah, Hygiene for All is a great project. They, like I said, they have these smaller buildings for showers, but they also have a healing garden, and they brought in a lot of different artists to help create this space and create a really beautiful plant wall to create a barrier between the road and the noise from cars to the space. So they painted the ground, which was really awesome. And I don't know much about the types of plants they have in there, but that was a pretty cool project to see integrate so many services on a pretty condensed site. Dee, I'm reading your question. You're saying, I noticed cost estimates didn't really get accounted for. Yeah, they do small projects. Oh, that's interesting. Where the government would offer sustainability stipends or other incentives for architects. That's a really great idea. I haven't thought about that on figuring out how to get architects paid for that work. Most of them have really donated their time, and talking to the architects who are drawing these drawings, they're telling me that it takes, you know, anywhere from 4 hours to 20 hours, depending on what they're doing to make it work for the project and working with our design parameters. And they've just been absorbing it or taking it on as part of their efforts. But I like that idea. And then I'm seeing Anne, you have a question. Are you looking for landowners to offer sites? Yes, I think land is very precious, and there's been a lot of conversation with the city. And if you're in Portland, you may know that the city is evaluating a city property that they can turn over to be villages. And for me, it feels like a really slow process, just in terms of they have until the end of June to provide kind of a public list of the land that they have identified for villages. But it feels like there needs to be a bit more urgency from my perspective, just in getting those up and running and addressing the needs that are here now. Because I think with the housing, there's definitely we need immediate solutions, but we also need long-term solutions. So if there are landowners who want land, and I'll broaden that to, if you know people who are going to be developing land maybe in a year or a year and a half, that year and a half is still a really great amount of time to get transitional housing up there and be able, and I say transitional in terms of they're more temporary, right? So that we can move them off the land if there is a bigger project that's going to be built. But providing a safe space, even for 6 months or a year, for people to know that they're going to have that security is really, really important. And I would love to talk to you offline if you do have spaces that you're thinking about. Great, thank you. And I'll have to get your contact information in. How are we doing on time, Kurt? I'm trying to read through the chat and see where the next question is.
We should move on as soon as we can.
Okay.
So I see that there's a couple of questions, so if you can have some briefness or maybe answer one in the chat.
Yeah, I can definitely answer Danielle's. So I work with Portland State University and the School of Architecture. And architecture students and interns can really come from any undergrad or community college or grad school. It's really about working with me to do community outreach and work with the architects and contractors to do education and awareness on that side, and do additional research to really start to drill down on these numbers. And I gave big numbers like 50,000 pounds have been diverted, but we want to get that into a bit of a break down that into materials and really start to understand what items we are diverting, but then see where there are places that we can continue to divert. I feel like flooring is a big one where it turns over, but it can really be used again, or there's extra carpet samples from architecture firms. I've had my architecture firm has donated lots of carpet samples because you get them and then you usually send them back or recycle them or figure something else out. But when you're thinking about small scale projects, small pieces of material go a long way. So I like to say, for a big 50,000 square foot building, a 4 foot by 4 foot piece of plywood doesn't go very far. It feels like extra. But when you're talking about an 8 foot by 12 foot structure, a 4 by 4 foot piece of plywood is half of the wall sheathing. And so when you start to put that into relative context and understand that 20 2x4s actually can frame most of the structure, it becomes a little bit easier to find that incremental shift. So I'll leave it at, I encourage you and challenge you to all find kind of that incremental shift in your own life where you can start to make an impact, whether that's in your personal life and advocacy or within your employment. And I'm going to answer the other questions via the chat so we can move on to the next presentation.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Really, everybody, Julia. And for everyone out there virtually, we're probably going to be about 10 or so minutes going overtime. So thank you for your patience. I like to imagine that most of you are already at home on the couch in your pajamas. It's probably one person taking a bubble bath, candle lights. So we're probably good. We're good. You're good. And for our final project this evening, the Afro Village PDX. Unfortunately, the teammates could not be here live tonight. So for sharing their project, we are going to show 2 videos. One is a video that the project made when going for a Metro grant a few months ago. There'll be a short one talking about their like how the project came into being, the process up until that point. And then the second video we will play, we recorded with Laquita and Marta of the Afro Village PDX team just a couple days ago. So special for tonight to be able to share the more of the now. So where they're at in the process and how y'all can support. And once again, I need to name that Green in the Hood. The title of tonight's event is a reference to the work that Laquita, who we'll be hearing from, has done. She's a dear friend, deeply loved, that we've been collaborating for many years now. And she's someone that one day I was like, who's this person walking up? Is like, we're painting the street. It's like, oh, they look pretty cool. And then like a week later, I'm in a community garden on a brown field that we were remediating, and like, oh, there's that person again. They are cool. And then the following week is City Repair was in City Hall, and there's Laquita again. It's like, damn, they're doing their work everywhere. We got to work with them. And so been happy to work with them and to be friends since. And so let me gear up to share the first video.
The Afro Village is not a physical place, it's a movement. It moves through food justice work, it moves through healing justice work, it moves through restorative justice, it moves through social equity, racial equity, and a radical approach to that. And so I believe in my movement of direct action, of like, we've talked enough about things. And so this is where we're at a place right now that we need more, for all of the history that continue to repeat itself. And how is that going to really help to repair and recover the damage that has been done to Black women and Black folks in America, and also in Portland, Oregon. Oregon has its history itself. We can go back to Vanport. We can go back to where Black folks settled in the 1800s. And that is what the uniqueness of this work is about, because it has brought, from my perspective and from many, partners that I have that believe in the work that I'm doing, to have some stability as we move forward. And so, through those actions and activities, like I said, I work with the Portland University. I've worked with Mudbone Grown. I've worked with Black Food Sovereignty. I've worked with the city of Portland. I've worked with the commissioners, and getting a broader perspective to really bring this development to our community. Hoping that this opportunity here with Metro would be what we need to have a home base, because the Afro Village has been evolving over the last 18 to plus months. It really evolved out of the work that my own personal life experience with housing, also with health, also with culture and community and unity. Learning all of the things that I learned working with the community, working with the Urban League of Portland. I felt like, this is something that is doable and it's possible with work being put into it to develop this alternative space, like other space, but really with the intention, taking, time and steps to be able to provide the proper services of to support the community, the unhoused community, the housed community. Black women is the center of this movement, the center of the work that I do, just overall. We want to be able to have a space to provide for showers. We will have a place where people can store their things. We will have a place where folks can be able to have a laundry and community and resources ongoing. So this funding, you guys, it's gonna just help uplift that and be able to, give us the home that we need and the home that we deserve. Just like any person or any human, it's a right to have a safe place to live. It's a right to have a safe place to shelter. It's a right to have a safe place to be able to use the bathroom and gather yourself during these times. So that's the Afro Village.
All right, and then we will now play a video we made special for tonight.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for attending VBS 2021 event. Thank you for holding space with us today. And this.
Oh, sorry, everyone. We realized that there was a audio problem, so we're going to restart.
It's in progress. How are you? The VBS 2021 event. Thank you for holding space with us today and checking out our Afro Village intro video. My name is Laquita Lanford. My pronouns are she and her. Many of y'all may know me by Q. I am the visionary and the founder and the aggravator of this movement, and it is a people's movement. So a little bit about how I got started, which I touched bases on in the previous video, but just to give you guys my voice right now, it's been a journey, and it's been about close to 3 years, I would say, is when I really got started with, trying to flesh out the idea or the concept around a community space for Black women, a tiny home community. I was at the time a housing caseworker with the Urban League of Portland, and I also worked with Join. And my day-to-day job and task at that time was to locate and help people find housing. And I found it to be really, with the market, then we had been in a housing crisis starting of 2015 is what our previous mayor had announced. And so we were having a lot of challenges with getting folks indoors at the time. And the people that I was working with were either in shelters or couch surfing or just, unhoused and living outside. And so I started working with a few folks who had some interest in the concept around a village, and took on to pretty much wanted to learn more about what the model that Right to Dream had started in their Reston safe area in the downtown location. So that was a start to me thinking outside of the box, outside of the normal four walls of an apartment, and what would be the possibility of a village that represent the people that look like me in the community. So I went on this long journey. I've been working with Kirk for several years. He's a really good friend of mine. And when I needed that support to tag along a meeting with me, to go meet up with some folks at Portland State to get connected with the resources or work that the Homeless Research Action Collaborative team does, that was where I was able to, learn more about what support that I could possibly utilize students in their fall term. So that was a really good start to the movement around just housing and being a housing justice advocate. And then that led me to being on many committees and speaking up, sharing other people's story, but with their permission to share their story about how people felt, how women felt that were living on the streets of Portland, how they felt unsafe with living on the streets in Portland, folks not being able to have a restroom or a kitchen to cook their own food, or just a place that they could, connect with community. So through that relationship with Portland State, I came up with a really great first step, a design on and learned a lot about alternative housing and sheltering and community placemaking. And that was a little bit before my last meeting with them was in March, before COVID. And I was introduced to Martha Patini, who works with the homeless research. She's a researcher and an architect. And so we had a meeting, our first meeting, and it was magical. We discussed just some of the challenges that I was having with getting the messaging out. And she has really great graphic design skills and just a wide range of skills that I was looking for to create, to continue the story that I was seeing, and then I was building upon. So we've done a lot of work, y'all. We've done an enormous amount of work in a year and a half. And the funding that we talked about, or the grants that we talked about at the end of our last video, which was a Metro, that video went into Metro, submitted for a Metro Community Placement Grant, and we won that grant. We applied for Portland Clean Energy Funds, and we won that grant. And I'll let Martha share with you all where we are today with our Afro Village movement, with the Max Train competition challenge that we won, all in respect and love from the community. So I thank you guys so much for giving us some time today to share our updates. And we're looking forward to working with you all in the future. Martha?
Yeah, thank you so much, Q, and thank you everybody for being here. As Vida mentioned, I'm from Italy, and I've been helping Q since last January 2020, just before the pandemic. And I've been really trying to use design as a tool to visualize her vision, to spark more conversation, to raise awareness around some of these core topics that she was mentioning. And one of the projects that we're working on right now is the Max Car Reuse project. So basically, what we did was to submit a proposal for the Max Train Reuse competition that was organized by TriMet and the city and Portland State University. And really, what we did was just basically to propose that what Laquita was doing in the community, all the services, all the programs that she was offering, would have been on trains and would have been able to move around the city and reaching the communities in need. So we designed these 3 trains, one focused on food, one focused on hygiene and sanitation, and one focused on therapy. And we won the People's Choice Award. So that was like an important milestone for us in order to spark more conversation with the Portland Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, Home Forward, PSU, and really trying to make this vision a reality. So since then, there's been so much work. As Laquita was mentioning, we were able to apply for these 2 grants, the Metro and the PISA grant. We were awarded both. So now we have some funding that is going to help us move the vision forward. But it's also such an innovative and unprecedented project that a lot of the money would just go in figuring out the train itself. And while this project moves forward, as Laquita was mentioning, the movement itself is also focusing on housing. And so, for example, we submitted an RFPQ with the city of Portland for an alternative shelter model that is really a new model that tries to focus on equity and home and land ownership for the Black community in Portland. So these are 2 projects, but the movement is much bigger, and there are constant effort moving along with all of these. So we will love more support on different pieces of the projects, from the financial piece, materials, labor. There is gonna be so
definitely.
so much work that needs to happen in the short and in the long term. So we really appreciate you being here. And Q, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about what we hope to have in terms of support.
Yeah, a few of our hopes community, with this, as we all, look towards each other to support each other through, I skipped over a huge amount of time, right? A year of being in a pandemic, a year of a very, a shift in our community, a shift in our lives, a shift just locally and globally. And so the efforts in which we are building on is our future, right? We have that experience of what really brought me to, it was my day-to-day work, but it also is my lived experience of foster care system and this housing discrimination and all of the, just the racism, the oppression and the system that happens in Black and Brown communities historically, right? And so as we move forward as a community here in Portland, we see, folks every single day, right, that are living on the streets of Portland that don't still have a place to go, and it doesn't look like it's a hopeful future. And so how do we, as a community, collectively build power and encouragement and confidence and all, so that we can move ourselves in our future, right, y'all? We know what our past, this is our present, so our future. So, the contributions financially is great. We would love that support as well. Our Afro Village PDX.com, Afro Village PDX.org is our website. So you could also check out our website. We will be refreshing our website in the next couple weeks to a couple months. So look out for, any updated information that we put that is offered there. We're also just looking for volunteers. We're looking for people with different skill sets that could help us move this project forward. And also, when the Max Train project is not happening today, but it's a part of our future into next year. So that's one way to just get a hold of us and just stay in tune with what it is that we're doing. We also have a Facebook page. Afro Village PDX project is on Facebook, and we also will be setting up an Instagram page as well, over the next couple months as well. So yeah, we're looking for land. This is that land piece is huge, like a nice site that reflects our community and reflects, and it's not too far out for the people that we're going to be serving in our future, and what it is that we could do now. I think I think that's it. Just stay connected through our Facebook page and through our always feel free to message me. I'm on Facebook. Feel free to find me on Instagram, and just stay connected. We really appreciate your time, your efforts, and your energy and community building, community placemaking, and being a part of this great event that these folks put on every year. I love it.
Q, I think we wanted also to have a question for the audience. Could share that.
Our question, yes, is what is your medicine? What medicine, and this is something that I've been checking out with what the activists and organizers are doing in Oakland, California. They have a really amazing movement happening to help and support and protect their unhoused communities. So they do an event that we're going to be partnering with them for in the future. That's called What's Your Medicine? So what's your medicine? What food? What's your healing? What skill sets do you have? So what is your medicine? What drives you? What moves you? What motivates you? Also, you know, what's your self-care? And that, because what we know and what we are aware of is that, again, we're still struggling, right? We're struggling on the day-to-day. So what's your medicine?
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Peace.
Perfect. What is your medicine? A perfect ending question for us to reflect upon for our theme, justice and healing and learning. And for me, one medicine that I often rely upon is lavender. And I've got a lavender satchel here in my pocket because, like I said, my body's been moving quicker than my brain. So while I've been off screen, I've been kind of sitting with my lavender satchel to like slow down a little bit and have an easier time being present. So as mentioned, we will share out to everyone's email a list of links that were shared in the chat, and some that we'll add. Since my computer was playing the video, I wasn't able to put in some links for the Afro Village. So that will be in a follow-up email, as well as this session tonight has been recorded and we will be putting it on our YouTube to archive. So if there's, if you're still wondering, what was that poem thing? You can come on back and review the recording, as well as please help share this out so that these wonderful projects continue to get airwaves, to get the support, and to connect with more community per their interest. And thanks again to our sponsors for tonight. That helps us to pay for the time for our presenters, as well as folks who donated to the event with the tickets, with the registration, and by getting grant support, and for folks who can pay to pay, it allowed us to open up space to not charge BIPOC folks, low income, no income, anyone that felt like I don't have the resources to share funds right now. And as Danielle mentioned, as Julia mentioned, there are many ways to support, you know, going all the way back into oneself, and how we continue to grow and support just our foundation. So thank you for going a little bit over time. This was day one of the 2021, the 21st anniversary of the Village Building Convergence. The events continue tomorrow. Let me throw in one more link to the Village Building Convergence events, so that you can see the events, the rest of the events happening this weekend. 2 tomorrow that are physically distanced in person will also be live streamed. And then there's, because you know, many of us are at home Zooming all the time, or just like sitting at our computers, we're inviting folks tomorrow evening to, it is over the computer, but there is a distance dance party that DJ Angeli and the Incredible Kid put on every Saturday night. And there on that event page, there's information about how to connect to that. And they throw their beats from 9 p.m. to midnight. So if you need to get some movement in, please check out these wonderful DJs that give a lot back to the community, both through giving their music at so many different events, but also for funds they raise. They're often given causes BLM. Recently, they were fundraising a lot to support COVID relief in India. So thank you again. Have a good evening, and may we all get some good rest and some good medicine. Ciao, ciao.